got to leave that there because the opposition leader, Bill Shorten, has just started a media conference.
Representation of women in the Labor Party is at the national level at an all-time high. Now, I appreciate that if Jenny George has some further ideas on how we can further improve upon our personal best performance already, that's fine, and we welcome them. We can always do better. But I would say that I'm not going to see the efforts of the National Conference in 2015, where we proposed 50-50, and all of the women MPs in the Labor Party who've reached senior positions and indeed positions in Parliament, and say that that hasn't been good. It is, and I salute them, and I'm going to keep working with my whole movement to further improve a fair go for women in Australia.
Why do you think it is your faction isn't pulling its weight in this regard?
When I think about Joe Ryan, and I think about Claire O'Neill, and I think about Jacinta Collins, and I think about Senator Kimberley Kitching, and I think about our great candidate Jennifer Yang, along with all of the women candidates in the Labor Party, they're doing a good job. I always welcome suggestions on how we can do better. But in the Australian political scene, the Labor Party, and when you visit Question Time and you look along the ranks of the government front bench and back bench and you look along the ranks of the Labor Party, we're doing as well as we ever have, but I'm not complacent. And if we want to improve women's representation in Parliament, vote Labor at the next election, because we're running a lot of women in a lot of seats.
Mr Shorten, the new Liberal candidate for the seat of Gilmore is a former national president of your party. Whatever you say about opposing candidates, you'd have to admit the new candidate needs to be a pretty prominent person in light of that, don't you?
Sorry,
Doesn't the fact that they have been the national president of your party speak highly of their competency?
well, when someone's a Labor Party representative, I think their values and policies for Australia are very good. But the Morrison's government values and policies are not policies I think are in the interest of the Australian people. So I would always pick the Labor candidate over the Liberal candidate. But let's go to the heart of the matter in this federal electorate of Gilmore, which is on the south coast of New South Wales. It's been a government seat. The current Member of Parliament isn't the new candidate. It's a woman Liberal MP called Anne Submalis. She's had to put up her hands and say she can't continue because of the bullying within the Liberal Party. Now what we see is chaos and division. It doesn't matter what day of the week it is when you open a newspaper, a common story, a daily story, is division. The next election, and your question went about which candidate and why to vote for them. A vote for Labor is a vote for stability. A vote for the Liberals is a vote for instability. A vote for Labor is a vote for a united party. A vote for the Liberal Party is for a vote for a divided and disunited party. I cannot, to be honest, I just can't believe how every day this current government get up and muck it up. They're so focused on themselves. I don't know how they find time to do anything else.
Chris Bowen has identified a problem with workers having too many superannuation accounts. Given that part of the problem is that workers are being defaulted into different accounts through the industrial relations system, how do you propose to rectify that?
Well, what we did when we were in government, first of all, it's a fair point. That we don't want to have people having multiple accounts and multiple fees and charges. One of the biggest problems is that when people have wanted to merge their superannuation funds, and I'm sure there's even people at this press conference who've tried to merge their funds, it was an unduly complex process, and some superannuation funds would put a lot of obstacles in your way to move your money from one fund to another. A particular problem I noticed was in the life insurance, where a bank fund would, for example, have quite an elaborate life insurance scheme which you would lose if you moved. So we want to make it easier for people to move and amalgamate their funds, and we did a lot of that in government. What we also want to do is make sure that people aren't put into funds which are chronically underperforming. Now, we all know the government's had an ideological crusade to the point of boring Australia to back the banks against industry super funds. We're not interested in who runs the fund. We're interested in, is the fund performing in the interest of the account holders and the beneficiaries. So Chris has proposed that we need to look at the bottom quartile of fund performers. If your fund over 5 years is constantly in the bottom quarter, it's time for those trustees to pull up their socks. Now, out of interest, it's just a point of technical factual data, that the bottom quarter of poorly performing super funds in Australia are run by the banks. They don't mind taking your money, they just don't like performing for it in too many cases in superannuation. So we're up for making sure that for poorly performing funds, they don't keep getting their mitts on money year in, year out. We'll work with the sector, we'll work with consumer representatives, and we'll work with the Liberal Party to try and get it right. But what the Liberals have to do is, if they want to be fair income about delivering better returns for workers, they've got to leave their hatred of industry funds at the door. They've got to grow up and look at performance rather than who the trustees are.
Do you accept, Mr. Shorten, the Treasurer's summary that Australia now faces real threats from the global economy? Or do you think the government is using that to try to make the economy a larger issue and campaigning for these?
There's no doubt there's instability on the global stage. But what worries me is that this government has squandered the last 6 years and not prepared Australia for any instability which could happen. This is a government who've let working Australians fall behind. At a time when savings are important, this is a government who's running wages policies, which means that people have to spend precious household savings just to keep pace. One of the ways that we inoculate us against difficulties around the world is that we make sure that the wages are moving at least comparable to where the prices are moving. Our challenge in Australia under this government is, as the world is unstable, childcare prices have gone up, cost of energy's gone up, private health insurance is becoming a luxury item. This is a government who has got the economy wrong, and every year in every budget they change their warnings. In 2014, Mr Abbott and Mr Hockey, remember them, they were the first attempt of the Liberals to run the country. They said austerity, they cut everything in sight. By 2016, the government's only plan became giving away money to the top end of town. And I predict in this budget coming up, they won't worry about the rest of the world. They're just going to try and spend some money to try and buy some votes to desperately get you to ignore the fact that this is a divided government who's mismanaged the economy over the last 5 years. Too much inequality, too much unfairness for working people, too many cuts to vital services like hospitals and education. This is a government who's not preparing Australia for the future. They're too busy fighting themselves.
And if that budget has a bottom line surplus on it, the April 2nd budget, will you find that credible, do you think? Or do you think that that might be an unbelievable figure given the election context we're in?
Well, we'll have to see the numbers, but let's say what's really going on in Australia at the moment. We've always had the budget in May. This government's bringing the budget forward unusually, and they're going to try and spend their way to victory. They're going to spend money, they're going to spend future money to just try and buy some votes now. This is a government who's stopped governing. One, they brought the budget forward early for political reasons. Two, they don't even have Parliament sit anymore. I mean, a government who can't attend Parliament's not in government. The fact that the Senate is only sitting for 7 days in 8 months, and the House of Representatives only 10 days in 8 months, if any ordinary Australian going to work today said, listen, boss, you'll see me for 10 days in the next 8 months, if that's all right, thank you very much. I mean, it's not credible. This is a government who's run out of puff. The budget's early, they don't want to come to Parliament, and they're very divided, and all they can do is talk about themselves. In the meantime, there are issues out there. Wages, everything's going up in Australia except prices. They've got no plan on climate change. Energy prices are out of control. You know, they've stopped governing. They're just worried about the next election.
Shorten, a couple of local questions. We know that these marginal seats in Central Queensland are going to be quite important for you. What do you see as the key issue in getting across the line?
Jobs. Jobs and jobs. Secure jobs, sustainable jobs. That's why we've announced $800 million for the Rockhampton Ring Road. Because we know that if truck traffic doesn't move through the centre of town but can move more easily, that saves costs, indeed it saves lives. We know that if we invest in the dual lane developments between Yeppoon and Rocky, that's going to recognise the fact that the coast has grown in population. It's going to make life easier. We know that if we invest money in the cardiac unit at the local hospital, that's going to improve the health outcomes for Central Queenslanders, and it means also they save costs and there'll be jobs there. We've announced a proper policy in terms of local procurement. So when we outline our expenditures, what we're going to require is that if someone wants to get a Commonwealth contract in Central Queensland, they've got to have a local component. There'll be no local contracts unless there are local jobs. So we think that's a very solid platform. When you combine it with what we're going to do to reverse the cuts to healthcare, when you look at our proposals to make sure that Central Queensland gets the best educational offerings possible, I think it makes sense that we're going to look after people and we're going to restore the penalty rates of workers who've had their penalty rates slashed.
Budget Airlines have told us that they're interested in reinstating direct flights from Sydney and Melbourne to Rockhampton once approval is made at Great Keppel Island. Do you see Great Keppel Island as a place that people from New South Wales and Victoria would like to come and visit?
Oh my word. It's a shame they didn't put Parliament up in somewhere near Rockhampton. This would be a great place to have Parliament. But Australians like the Queensland coastline. They're very proud of the Barrier Reef. This is a superb tourist offering. I think I said earlier in my opening about the importance of domestic tourism. It would be really good if Australians could come and see their own regions and their own beautiful country, and they want to. So if we can do things to improve airline access to Central Queensland, I think it's one of the missing links. If we can make it a bit easier for people to get here, then I think you'll see a new wave of tourism. But this is the vision I have for Central Queensland. I might finish up the press conference on this note. We've announced this week so far a commitment to local procurement. That means that when Commonwealth money is being spent in the regions, we'll decentralise the contracts so local businesses and local jobs are created. We're proposing ways of improving the infrastructure. We understand that Central Queensland's a resources economy, that defence plays an important role, that agriculture is fundamental to its future, but so is tourism, so is education, so is health. We look at Central Queensland and we see a diversified, exciting economy. Central Queenslanders don't want a handout from the government, but they would like to see some of the taxes they pay to Canberra reinvested in their community. Russell Robertson doesn't take no for an answer. He has pushed this proposal, along with Brittany Lauger, the state member here, to make sure that we invest in tourism. What you need in Central Queensland is politicians who listen to you no matter what your political perspective and fight for you. This bloke is carved from Capricornia. He has worked in nearly every town in Capricornia, third generation coal miner. He's exactly what the political doctor ordered for people in Central Queensland who are sick of being treated as LNP heartland. On that positive note, why don't I go? I've got a bus to catch. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, so that was live from Great Keppel Island off the Central Queensland coast. The opposition leader, Bill Shorten, speaking there. We're expecting the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, to step up for a media conference later today, possibly with the expected Liberal candidate for the seat of Gilmore, Warren Mundine. So we'll bring that to you live here on the ABC News channel when that happens.